Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Test Automation Mantras. In today's video, I'm going to cover NUnit framework. To cover the test under NUnit framework, I'm going to create bank account application which will be based on debit and credit transactions. We will understand the attributes in NUnit framework, which is test fixtures, setup, test cases, and there are a few more we'll cover as and when we go. The bank account application will be based on two inputs. One is customer name and the account balance. Account balance here is the initial balance in the account. The customer deposits money in the account and customer withdraws money from the account. So that these are the two basic functionalities we are going to develop and build. And the test scenarios for these two functionalities are going to be if account have an initial balance of say $100 and deposit can be any amount greater than zero. Say for example, customer deposits $20 in the account, so it is going to be say 120 as an balance. Deposit cannot be zero. If amount is less than zero, then application should throw an error. So here deposit is nothing but a credit transaction. Now let's take an example of the debit transaction. So if account have an initial balance of $100 and customer withdraws $30 out of it, the balance should be 70 by end of the transaction. Customer cannot withdraw an amount greater than $100 because $100 is the initial balance customer got. Customer cannot withdraw negative amount as well. Say, for example, negative 20, application should not allow to do that. So that should be handled. There are a few attributes as mentioned above. So test fixtures is one of the attributes which is defined at the class level. So this defines that class contains the test methods in it. There's another attribute test, which is defined at the method level and defines that method as a test method. Now, setup is another attribute. It is once it is defined on top of any method, that means that will run before every test method. Tear down is another attribute which allows to run after every test method. The assertions are a way to validate the conditions that's been put in the test and in the methods. So now let's start the steps. What we are going to follow in today's video is first we will create a NUnit test project. The second step is we are going to create a bank account application. Step 3, we are going to write a NUnit test. Step 4, we are going to run the NUnit test to see whether it's working. Step 5 will be handling the exceptions or errors in the application, bank account application. And step 6 is use of test case attribute to handle the data-driven scenarios. So let's get started. So NUnit is an open source unit testing framework for the .NET framework. If any of you have used Java before, so it works same as JUnit. Now we'll create a NUnit test project. Select the NUnit 3 test project. Enter the project name. So I'm going to use something like NUnit bank account project. Select the location wherever you want to save the project. Select the target framework. So I'm using .NET 5.0 for today's video. And click on create. The project is created successfully. Let's wait for dependencies to be downloaded. Yep, looking good now. Let's create a new class as a bank account to add all of our bank account related code. So class is created. Now you're just going to follow the same steps what we are going to write in the code. The first step is going to be, since we are creating a bank account details, as I mentioned, It's containing debit and credit transactions. The first step is to accept two different input parameters that we need to have a customer name and we need to get the current balance of that customer. The second set will be so input, like say for example customer name is going to be John and we are that John is having a balance of $100. The second is credit the amount. So say for example John deposits some amount in the bank account. So say he's going to deposit $50 here. So the balance is going to be 100 plus 50, so which is 150 here. Now, say for example, John wants to withdraw some amount from the account, so it is going to be a debit transaction. So John withdraws. Um, we can use the same code down as well. So say John is going to withdraw $20, and his initial balance is say $50. So in this case, John got 50 as the initial balance, and he's going to withdraw say $20. So the balance which is going to be end of the transaction is $30. So this is pretty much the steps we are going to cover. So let's create, we need two variables. We will declare the customer name is going to be string and we are going to use balance, could be decimal places. So we are going to use double. Now let's create a constructor of the class of the bank account, and we are, as mentioned, we will have two inputs: its customer name and the balance, which is going to come from the test methods. So always let's correct the balance as it was declared as string, it should be double. Now we are going to get the customer name. So let's set up the getters for customer name as well as for the balance. So we are going to use underscore customer name for the customer name. Okay, this looks good. Let's create another getter for the balance. Yeah, done. Now it's time to create our two different transactions. So let's create two different methods, one for credit. We are going to create method for credit. So it's not returning any value. So its type is going to be void. The name of the method I'm going to use is credit account, and the amount we need to pass as input parameters here. So type of double, because that's the amount the customer is going to withdraw. So it needs to be entered from the customer. Now let's create another method as a debit account, and it's again not going to return any value, so the type is going to be void. It's again going to accept the input parameter as amount. Customer can enter with amount which customer wants to withdraw. So for the credit amount, you can see that it's going to be balance equal to sum of the current account plus the amount entered, and in case of debit balance, it's going to be negative. Now let's create our test. So I'm going to create bank account test class. Okay, since class was already open here, so in the editor, so I have to rename that manually. It doesn't give any exceptions. Let's add our attribute as test fixture to define this class as a test class. As you can see, we have setup and test attributes as we discussed before. So anything which needs to run can run before every test method will go in the setup method. And since we are going to have two different methods, we are going to test is credit amount test, and the other method I'm going to create for the debit amount test. Both of the methods got attribute as test, so that defines that these two are the test methods. Now what we need to do is we need to create an instance of the bank account class. So the variable name I'm using is underscore bank account. So new is used to create an instance of the class. Now we created two constructors with the parameters and without parameters. So the one I'm going to use is with the parameters, because we need to pass inputs as customer name and the balance, which is the initial balance. So I'm going to declare that variable in the top so that I can use inside the methods. So now bank account or credit account, say Joan is going to deposit $50 in the account. Now let's get the current balance. I'm going to declare another variable here to get the current balance. And the current balance, you can get it from the bank account dot balance. Now I'm going to write a simple assertions to validate whether the amount is correct or not. So I'm expecting that the expected amount is going to be 100, the current balance. And I can do that comparison. The 0 is to just compare the difference, but at this point we are not using that variable. So the expected is 150 and the current balance is coming from the bank account dot balance. And here we go, the test passed. So say, for example, just to test whether its functionality is working fine or not, I change the expected amount and I'm going to rerun the test again. And this time it should fail. As you can see, the expected is 120, but actually it was 150. So the current balance is 150. Now let's do the debit transactions. Same thing we are going to do for the debit amount test method as well. So in this case, we are going to call the debit account and we are going to debit the $50 from it. So now initial balance still $100 because this test is independent to the credit one. So initial balance 100, the $50 is the withdrawal amount, the balance left is $50. So as you can see, it's working. You can test this like by changing the amount and see whether it's working fine or not. Say I change the amount from 50 to 80, and if I try to run it again, it should fail this time with the expected as say 80, but actually the balance was 50. So you can see our the bank account application is working fine with the initial values. Now we are going to create a data-driven testing using the test case attribute here. So in the test case, you can pass a number of parameters. Say, for example, our first input is Joan, and then the second is our initial balance. The third parameter is going to be the amount, which could be, in this case, it's a credit amount, and the last value is the expected value. So now inside the credit, to use those variables inside the test case, we are going to declare different variables here under the credit amount is method. So the first variable is customer name, second is initial balance, third one is amount, and the fourth is the difference, or which could be the expected amount. Now I'm calling the create credit account method here, and I'm passing the amount which I've declared in the test case attribute. Let's change that variable name as expected amount, as I said. So we're all good. Let's try to run it. Sometimes we need to clean and build the project. If it doesn't work, please build the project. So in this case, the test case is failing because of expected and actual values not matching. Now you can see that expected is 150 and it's matching with the actual balance. Now second test case is where you enter the negative amount and you're expecting $50 here. In this case, it's going to fail because the credit amount cannot be negative. So in this case, test case should fail, but currently it is not failing, it's passing. The reason is that because we don't have any conditions put in the application which can stop the input in the negative value. Say for example, 150 is accepted here. So what we are going to do is we are going to go to our bank account application. So let's go to bank account class and we are going to put some conditions here. Say for example, in case of credit account, if amount is less than 0, which could be negative, in that case, application should throw an error. So in this case, the exception we are going to throw is argument out of range exception. And as you can see that specified argument was out of the range of the valid values. That's the default system message is being displayed. So what I have done is I have put specific messages and I have declared those as a variables on the top, which is a constant variables. So Instead of system exceptions, you can see a specific message or user-defined message in case of any exceptions or errors. So I have put all the exceptions if amount is going to be less than 0, which is in case of credit. Then you will see an exception message that credit amount is less than 0. Also, in case of debit account, I have put other conditions as well. So for the debit, say for example, amount is greater than the balance. The customer is trying to withdraw, say $100, but the balance is 80. So then exception will be thrown. If amount is less than 0 and the customer is trying to say withdraw a negative balance, which cannot happen, so application will throw exception in this case as well. Let's try to go back to our test and try to define all different scenarios and try to run the test again. So we're defining scenarios for the credit amount test. And we can define the similar scenarios for the debit amount test as well. And let's try to run our test. You can change the test data as you want. So just cleaning up the project solutions and building it. Now let's try to run the credit amount test. If you see that one of the tests which is failing, you're getting specific message that credit amount is less than 0, as in the second scenario. Now let's try to run our debit amount test, and we can see all of them are failing because we have not implemented the code yet for the debit amount test. And let's do that. Let's create all the variables as we did in the credit amount test and replace all the values with the variables which we are passing via the test case attribute. Let's try to clean again and try to run the debit amount test. So in this case, the one passing, the one failing, is you can see that we are getting two different messages, that one case amount exceeds the balance